So, hello everyone, I'm David Chalmers and I'm one of the trustees of charity Sunrise Diversity. And today I'm going to be interviewing an old friend of mine, Charlene Liu, who's based in Shanghai, who's actually with us today from Shanghai. As those of you know, Sunrise Diversity is a charity that normally hosts its annual Diversity and Pride Festival in Barnstable as a physical event. But the last 2 years, because of COVID, we've actually put everything online. And we've had a fantastic week of events that have done. What we do is that we celebrate diversity, we challenge discrimination, and we change attitudes in rural areas like Northern Devon, where we're based. If you want to find out more about us, you can find out on our Facebook page, which you're looking at now, probably, or from our website, Sunrise Diversity. So without ado, I'm going to introduce you to, as I said, an old friend of mine. We met when I was based in Shanghai in 2014. We were just talking about that earlier. And it was an amazing experience to have met Charlene and the great people who organized Shanghai Pride. So, hey, lovely to see you, Charlene.
Very nice to see you again, David. And hello, everybody.
Yeah, fantastic. We just had a session before this one, which was talking about the importance of pride for an area like ours. And I just put it into context here. When I first started getting involved with the charity, we had a diversity festival, and people said, "Oh, do you think we'd be able to have a pride parade through the local town?" This is 6 years ago, and people were like, "Oh God, no! Oh, people aren't ready for that around here. They'll be, I don't know, they'll be throwing stones at us." And yet, 2 years ago, we actually held a pride parade through the centre of Barnstable, which is the main town here. It's this is a small town of about 20, 30,000, but a lot of small rural outlying areas. And the mayor of the town and the mayor of all the other towns were there with their chains on. We had a big rainbow flag that went down the centre of the main street, and people turned out cheering, and it was amazing. So I always had that in my mind because of when people had said, "Oh, we're not ready for this here," I always thought of Pride in Shanghai and just what an amazing, an event that was. I mean, I'm going to hand over to you because you're the person who, I think, best tell us about what it was and what you did with that, how you went about it.
Well, of course, I'm happy to share our experiences, how we actually got started. In fact, organizing Pride was never in my so-called life planning, and but it just happened. It fell on my lap, and I'm very happy and very proud to be part of it. Just a little bit more about myself first, David, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I'm from Malaysia. I spent a few years in the US for my undergraduate degree, and then spent a couple more years back in Malaysia to work in manufacturing, in semiconductor manufacturing. Then moved to Singapore for almost 8 years. Back then, I was still very much in the closet, and followed my then girlfriend to over there. 8 years after, things didn't work out, so that's how I changed my scene again and landed in Shanghai. That was in 2005. So it's been almost 16 years now and counting, hopefully, that I've been in Shanghai. So all in all, I've been in a very conservative, well, I should say upbringing, as well as in school, throughout most of my career in the tech space, very conservative, very much in the closet, I guess, until in my early 40s. I'm 48 this year. I'm proudly out everywhere, basically, but it took me a long time to get here, of course. So in 2005, I landed in Shanghai, and I was supposed to start a new chapter in my life to be more, how to say, straight and low key. That didn't happen. I met many friends in Shanghai in the beginning, and we hung out almost at the, you know, in 2005, things were more, how to say, centered. There weren't so many hangout places, and you tend to meet the same people practically almost everywhere.
Yeah.
And I did. These bunch of friends turned out to be part of the LGBTQ community. So from then on, we just connected, started organizing our own events, such as house parties, sports club, shopping trips, and all. It became like a network, and then it became more of like a welcoming committee, if you want, if you can call it that way, to people coming to Shanghai, wanting to check out the scene, asking about how things are, how accepting things are, or how, how much they can be out, and how friendly people and businesses are. So that was how it started. We just became like a network. And in 2009, some of us were leaving Shanghai then. Some of my friends were leaving Shanghai, and we decided that, you know what, let's throw a big farewell party and organize all the events that we have been doing anyway throughout the years, and put them together in 1 week. And then we naively, well, we were very naive back then, called it Shanghai Pride. Let's have a parade, walk down the street. But of course, we realized that we couldn't do it here in China. That's how we started getting more creative, like, can we do sports event outdoors? Can we do a bigger party instead of house parties? Or can we do a series of sports events like basketball, volleyball, and swimming, and putting it together, things like that. So that's pretty much how we started in 2009 when we called it Shanghai Pride. But we weren't planning on making this an annual event, actually, until the year after, which was 2010. And we had many friends coming up to us, organizers, and saying that, oh, they were volunteered for the events, they participate at the events and met the significant other, or found the courage to come out, or found new friends in the community. So it gave us that sense of feeling that, wow, we are connecting people together. We're actually kind of helping people who needed more connections or more support. So we decided that we can do it again in 2010. And every year we said, okay, this is it, but it kept happening. We did it again and again. Yeah, so it's been 12 seasons, if you want to call it. So that has kept us going. We have always been run by volunteers. As you know, David was one of our volunteers back in 2014. And but we're pretty organized, I have to say.
We understatement.
Yeah, we have different groups for different activities. If you remember, we had the party groups, and then we had the conferences, people who are in charge of conferences or the films, even people managing the volunteers and translation. So that's how we ran things. Yeah, it's pretty much organized. We are not as big as London Pride or San Francisco.
I beg to differ, because having come from, my experience of Pride before I came to Shanghai was Hong Kong, and Hong Kong, really was like a handful of people doing, it just didn't. We did have a sort of a flotilla of boats that went out, and but it was like one event, and that was it. And yes, I'd seen London and others, but what really struck me about Shanghai Pride was, and you touched on it here, but it was just the breadth of it, the amount of, the film festival that we put on, that was a festival in its own right. And then you put on there were the amazing parties that were, dance parties that were organized. There were picnics, there were art festivals, art exhibitions, there were debates. I remember going to the one about parents. So it was, and there were thousands of parents in the room, and I was just like, wow, how did this sort of happen? That was just happening as part of what we was doing. So that, I think it is just so inspiring, Charlene. How you managed to, and it really was yourself. I think that there's a force of nature that somehow you managed to sort of coordinate and hold all this together. But I'm putting it into the context for people to understand. How many visitors did you used to get to Pride?
Okay, well, when I say it's not as big, I mean, we don't really go thousands and thousands, right? I mean, one year we have 5,000 to 6,000 thereabouts. And the reason is also because we run most of the events closed doors, if you remember. We're always indoors, and we have to control the numbers. If you remember, like every film screening is you're not allowed over like 120 or something like that. So I would say, the reach in terms of attendance is not high, but we hope at least the reach in social media is high. And yeah, one year we had about 60, almost 8,000. I think there was a 10th year celebration in 2018. And that's also because we had like 30 something events in the span of 16 days. So it's like average of 2 events a day. And we had a gallery that showed all the photos and souvenirs of all the past years. So that drew in a lot of people. And well, at least we could do something. It's more like the visibility that is projected, right? So it's more of that than the numbers.
Because I remember it being really inspiring for other places around China, but certainly other places around Asia. And I suppose it comes back to my original question. We had a little event on here which we didn't think we could go ahead with, and I always had in my mind what Shanghai did, and if you'd mentioned, people would go, oh, well, Shanghai Pride, but what we're just describing, it was this massive event. And what's your view on how important sort of Pride is for a community, for individuals?
Well, speaking personally, I think it's so important because it's actually through organizing all these events that I finally accepted myself. In 2014 when we met, I wasn't out at work yet, right? I was kind of out to mom and family because because of breakups, I had to come out, and it had to do with all the burden that came with breaking up. Anyway, but I wasn't out yet. But through organizing all these events, I started to realize, started to understand myself, started accepting myself, started being able to talk about who I truly am, and also be authentic about my relationships. And that's important because now I feel completely happy to talk about myself, David. Back then, especially at work or even to some friends outside of the LGBTQ and ally community, I wouldn't talk about who I am, who I'm dating, who I went for a holiday with over the weekend or over the holidays. So it is very important. And although, we don't have like big events or activities, but the visibility is important because it also shows to people out there who are questioning themselves or are looking for connections or network or support, right? That, hey, there are people like them. It is important. I mean, it does not even have to be an event. It just has to be some sort of visibility, talking about it, even in day-to-day conversations.
Well, the events themselves were amazing, but as somebody who came into it, it felt very much like a family. The organizing and the pulling together of people. And I interviewed Frank Mugisha from Uganda just a few days ago, and he was saying, one of the things that really struck me there was just, he said, it maybe isn't as bad in China, that people aren't sort of disowned in the same way by their families, but it is still a challenge. And for those, it's a way of being able to come together, exactly what you're saying, be yourself, be surrounded by others, but at the same time, you were putting on an event, which I have to say, I think was just amazing.
Well, thank you, David. You're part of it, so
Yeah, yeah. And I'm leading on from that. You know, we talked about earlier that just before we came on, about the gay games in Hong Kong, which is scheduled for next year. That must be really exciting. I mean, I know my friends in Hong Kong are really excited about this. But do you have any sort of advice to them on what the organizers, on how they ought to be sort of putting this together? I know one of the organizers is actually on listening in to this. So we got any advice to them?
I won't say that I have any advice for them, because, you know, they are like our role models, being able to pull this off, and we're so proud and excited for them. I myself, me and the team here, we're even talking about how to get there already next year, and how to get a team from here to go there. I think it was like the previous gay games that was in Paris. We did a fundraising for the team from here to go to Paris. So we were really excited, and getting the gay games to Asia for the first time, you know, is can't wait. Yeah. I think maybe one advice is, you know, keep going. I'm sure there are tons of challenges already. You know, keep going. Basically, you guys are the beacon. All right, we're looking up to you, and you're going to draw us all together.
Yeah, no, I know, and we said we're hoping we'll be able to meet up there, because I think it'll be an amazing time. But one of the things that you were just saying about challenges, and with Shanghai Pride, you managed to find a way around challenges. I remember you hinted on it earlier about not being able to parade, you know, which is obviously it's a big part of Pride, actually being out on the street with others, walking, parading, sort of being out, as it were. Even, you know, there might be numbers of you, but do you remember how we got around? How you got around that with the run? I mean, that was. Yeah. You like to describe that?
And that's how I met my wife. Yeah, in 2013. Well, we knew that we were never going to be able to do the parade, but we decided that actually 1 year in 2013, one of the volunteers was like, we run a lot. Everybody runs, so why don't we just run? And we package it as a Pride run. So we're like, okay, let's do it. So we managed to pull that off. That was in 2013. We ran from one park to the other park, and my wife, that was the first time I met her. She actually ran into my life that day. So we continued doing that, and then, you know, picking up from that, we realized a lot of companies and other organizations and runners themselves were interested to be part of it, because one, it is a sort of coming out, or to be in the open, to be visibly open, so in supporting the community. And two is, hey, it's a healthy thing to do, right? It's for exercise purpose. And three is, so some organizations take that as team building events for their annual.
That's the postman. Sorry. I did warn that that was the postman that came. So yeah, carry on. Sorry.
Well, I think the run is actually one of the most popular events, and every time we promote it, the spots get taken up in less than an hour. But of course, we don't have that many spots to begin with. We always try to keep our events under regulated numbers. So, and that's probably the reason also how we can maintain or be sustainable, being able to continue carry on. Of course, we also have to think about like road safety, volunteer safety, the runners safety, and so on. And then and every year finding venues who would host us. So it is a challenge, but it's not like something that we cannot.
No, and what I have to add here, as somebody who did take part in it, it was such fun. There was, although it was a lot of, it really was. It was, and you could see the joy on everyone's faces. There was none of us who didn't realize just how, you know, it really did put on. you know, that smile on people's faces was quite amazing. I'm going to, you mentioned your wife, you know, we know one another. Have you been married? How are you now, you know, legally married?
So yeah, we met in 2013 at Pride, and in 2015 we were married in Honolulu, Hawaii. Incidentally, it was the same year that the U.S. Passed the Marriage Equality Act. And we chose Hawaii because we both liked the sun and the beach and the water. That was the only reason. And of course, they allow foreigners to be married there. So yes, we are legally married, and we have a certificate to show for, which is like, you know, in my earlier life, I thought that, you know, we don't need a certificate. We don't need a marriage certificate, but it is something to be proud of, especially in our relationship.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Is your marriage recognized in China?
Well, unfortunately, not yet, I would say. Why I put the word yet behind is because we're still hopeful. Who knows? Like I think it was last year that I think it was considered a subject to be talked about in Congress or something, but it didn't go through. But anyway, there is visibility, so I'm still being hopeful. So hopefully, one day in my lifetime, at least, we hope to see that it is recognized. My wife is Chinese. Yeah, but
yeah,
okay.
Which would be great, because I remember we talked about this, how, you know, for a long time, you know, in Chinese families, there was concern about the same-sex relationship not having children and not being a sort of a part of the family unit, because the family is so important in China. But actually, a marriage is a sort of a stable relationship and enables a family. It is a family. So there was a sort of, you know, when I was there, and as I said, back in 2014, that discussion was really starting to take place, certainly amongst parents, amongst families, how there'd been a concern about that. So you're saying that is still sort of ongoing, is it?
Well, yeah, it is still ongoing. David, this is it's a huge country, right? And there's so many families, can you imagine? And but I'm really happy that there are parents supporting parents in terms of counseling, or parents whose children just came out to them. Even parents have to come out, so to speak. You can't just tell your parents and then leave them there. You kind of have to help your parent to come out. So it is still a very common topic, not popular topic. So if you have any conferences related to parents, there is always a lot of people, a lot of attention on it. And you're right, you know, because the family unit is such an important thing here. I've come across parents who have accepted their LGBT children, and the only thing they ask of them after that is like, you know, how are you going to give me a grandchild?
Yeah.
Right. So actually, it's about the grandchild.
Yeah. No, it is, and that is, but outside of marriage, it would have been harder to have those grandchildren. And I'm just thinking of a common friend of ours who was the British Consul General in Shanghai back in 2014, Brian Davidson. And Brian is now, you know, he's been ambassador in Bangkok for a number of years with his husband and their children. He was they were the first same-sex couple to be married in the embassy, British embassy in Beijing. He's now moving to Hong Kong to be the British Consul General in Hong Kong. So that, I think it's really interesting, because he is a real sort of role model, exactly what you're saying about somebody, authority, married, children, and going to Hong Kong just as the Gay Games is going to be happening next year. So I think, you know, Either the British are doing something interesting and the Chinese, because if you remember when we were there, he put forward to be married in the embassy, and we weren't sure if it was actually going to happen, because they had to have the authorities, the Chinese authorities, agreement to it, and the Chinese authorities went, oh, yeah. So by going, we're not going to object, they sort of supported it happening. So, you know, I always felt that there was real hope that something along those lines might happen. So let's keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah, like I said, really, hopefully in my lifetime, something's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Please give love to your wife as well. Again, hopefully we'll be able to meet up next year in Hong Kong. I'm going to just, because when I was talking to other people, they said, wow, Charlene has done so many things. And I wanted to talk about Pride because that was so important. And I said it touched my life. But I've looked at what you've been doing in the last few years. And would you like to sort of tell us a little about Ladies Who Tech?
Sure.
because let me say this, I'm a governor of a college here in Northern Devon, Petrock College. And one of the issues that we have is, you know, I'm also, they show us these stats. And I say, well, yeah, but how many girls, how many women have you got on the courses for engineering? That's what I want to know. What are you doing to actually encourage more women to be involved in this area? STEM, absolutely. But I'm talking for you, but could you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think...
Yeah, Ladies Who Tech. Okay, so, well, it all started with Pride, right? With Pride, and my background as an engineer, women in engineering and in semiconductor and manufacturing, very few of us out there already. So in the beginning, I didn't think that, oh, there was the issue. I thought, okay, it's a norm. Like, why would there be more women? It never crossed my mind, never crossed any of our minds back then when I started working in the late 1990s. So in 2015, okay, so right, it has to do with Pride, and it has to do with Derek and I getting married in the US. Yeah. So we went from Shanghai, we wanted to go to Hawaii. On the way to Hawaii, we stopped by at San Francisco. We stayed with this couple, and this couple, both of them took 1 year off to travel around the world in 2012 to make a documentary of LGBTQ community leaders. And in 2012, they stayed at my apartment in Shanghai and interviewed us, ShanghaiPRIDE. So, so it was like returning a favor. We stayed with them in 2015, and that same week they had a debut of the documentary they made, and it was debuted at it was a premiere at Castro Theater, the very famous theater at Castro District, San Francisco. So they invited me to be one of the speakers because I was in a very short, I had an appearance there. So I was one of the speakers. And the organizer is actually an organization called Lesbians Who Tech. So I didn't know what it was. Yeah, I didn't know what it was, but I went, right?
Yeah.
And to my surprise, there were 1,000 women who are in the tech space, right? There were scientists, rocket scientists. I met this rocket scientist, engineers, people in coders, programmers. So it just hit me like, oh, there are 1,000 women who are, some are queer, some allies, and they're all in tech space. And why don't we have something like this back in Shanghai? So that got me thinking. And then I told the Pride team, I told the Shanghai Pride team, you know what, let's do something like that. Have like a Lesbians Who Tech as part of Shanghai Pride queer women group. So they're like, yeah, sure, let's do some events. So we did. And then moving forward after that, when I came back to Shanghai after the wedding, coming back to Shanghai, I started doing a few events. A friend of mine, she's an ally, and she was like, you know, she was making some comments about women's groups being too chicken soup, too mushy. And she's like, we need, if you want to talk about tech, you know, talk about tech, not because how you can be better or how you can be the same as other as men in tech. Just talk about tech, but have women talking about that. Then I'm like, yeah, you know what? Let's spin it off and be more focused on women and on tech. But then, of course, we couldn't call it lesbians to tech because it is a sensitive word. You might get arrested.
Yeah.
So we changed lesbians and we changed to ladies. Yeah, and we created our own brand, kind of, and that's how we continue doing it. So it is really, it has something to do with my background as an engineer and being a woman in a very male-dominated industry. So how are we going to encourage more women to go into tech? By having role models, people who are in leadership positions, who are in tech leadership positions, talking about their journey, talking about their work, but then they happen to be women. So when you see there's a role model, then you know that you can become like that. There's a possibility you can become like that. And then the other aspect of working with this group is also reaching out to companies, because companies need to, they need to be the ones pushing this agenda forward, right? Pushing this needle forward to say, okay, yes, we understand the benefits of being more diverse, being more gender diverse, whether in terms of design, in engineering, or in leadership, in accounting, in finance, in every industry, right? Why is it so important? So we were working with different groups. Of course, then, you know, there's a school that you need to influence, then there's a community at large, and hopefully governments. So that's how it came about. That's why I'm in this whole diversity and inclusion space for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And I love it. I've turned my passion into my business.
Because that leads on to D&I Consulting. Is that's the sort of, that's your work now, is it? Yeah. It
is my work now. I have Ladies Who Tech as one business entity. I have a co-founder, and we both work on this segment. And then we have the Dni Consulting, which we started because we wanted to encourage and help companies, corporations, organizations to be more LGBTQ friendly, be more inclusive. But then inclusion doesn't mean only for LGBTQ or gender. Now we talk a lot about people with disability, people of different ages, even in some companies, ethnicity. So one little steps at a time, you know, gender and LGBT, and we can move to the next topic.
Sunrise, you know, the organization, charity that this is a part of, does exactly that as well. We have a pride element, but it's all forms of diversity. So you're right, disability, ethnic minority, gender, age, you know, it is across the board, and many of those, and a lot of the things that you find are the same sort of challenges and discrimination that you might find here. We've got quite an aging population in our area here, and one of the ways I was able to get them to understand what we were about was to say, well, you know what the sort of discrimination you get when you go into a shop and people, you know, don't want to help you, or to get that job, you're not even going to be interviewed. You know, people sort of have a perception of you, what they think you're like. Well, that's how people think towards somebody because of their sexuality or because of the color of their skin or whatever. And that's what we're trying to sort of challenge. So it is a challenge bringing all the bits together, as it were. But actually, I think there's strength in that. How are, you know, China? China is a sort of a country, I think, from outsiders who think, well, it is more of an egalitarian society for women, but there are challenges there for women getting into the tech area and science?
Well, it depends how you look at it, right? There is not a challenge of women getting into tech or science. In fact, education is fair.
Yeah.
Right. Anyone, regardless of gender, can get into education, and it depends on what you want to pick, and, you know, exams play a part as well. But, you know, if you look at the overall picture, it's not only in China. You look at overall picture, you have maybe a large number of women who go into schools, tech schools or tech related subjects. And then you have the numbers will will decrease when they graduate. And then when they go into workforce, even smaller number. And then the women who are already in the workforce going up to middle management in tech, right? Even smaller, even going up to leadership, and then being in a board, it gets smaller and smaller. It's like a funnel. So it's not that the opportunity is not there. Sometimes it's also how society and how ourselves, women ourselves, think of whether or not we can get into STEM, right? Example, and this is a recent example, David. I have students coming up to me at Ladies Who Tech events and asking me, and if I'm really an engineer, because they think, oh, because I always thought that women cannot be engineers. So this is only a man's job, until they meet me and the people who speak at my events. So imagine the shock that I face, right? It's also like, who told you that you cannot become an engineer? Or in other words, we should say, hey, we are now telling you that anybody can become an engineer if you want to do it, and if you have a passion to do it, if you work towards it.
Yeah,
so
and you're absolutely right. You know, it's the same issues that we face here, getting into a senior role in a company as well, because you say it's like a funnel. The number, I'm just thinking back for when I was working in Hong Kong, Mary Ma, who was the CFO of Lenovo. Do you remember her? And she was this big sort of, she was running basically one of the major Chinese companies, but it was a real exception. You know, I mean, you think of all the companies there are. I mean, she was doing a great job, but I couldn't think of any other woman that had got to that sort of that role. So yeah.
Well, right now there are many women who are in higher level positions in tech industries or in tech positions, which is great. We don't see enough of them because they're not very visible or vocal about where they are. Would they? I think they should be, because if you have it, you have the brains for it, and you're there. For me, it's like, please show it, and it also can influence younger generations, women as well as other genders, right? So you can, if it's in the norm, then people will think that, okay, it's mainstream, we don't really have to talk about it anymore, or we don't really have to say that, oh, she's a female engineer or female CEO. We can say, oh, she's a CEO.
Do you find, though, that, say, Western companies who are operations in China, do you have the same problems with them, or is it more the challenges with Chinese companies? I'm just trying to think, because you would think that a lot of companies now, I mean, it's not perfect here by any, over here in the UK or in America, there's a real sort of, people are trying to do exactly what you're doing, but a lot of them, the international companies try to make, they try to put themselves over as being much more aware and trying to promote women and have, equal number of women on their boards and things like that. And it is there as a really important topic, diversity and inclusion on what they do. It is. If you ask them, I've been doing quite a bit of work with them at the moment, and it's there. It may not be number one at the moment, because there's that other thing that's been going on in the world, begins with a P, pandemic, but which has knocked a lot of plans off. But it is there. So I wonder, do they do that when they're based in China, or is it mainly the Chinese companies that you find the ones that you're needing to work with?
Well, actually, David, in terms of diversity and inclusion in general, right now we see more companies that have more global MNCs willing to talk about it, willing to take the step to implement D&I policies, being more inclusive. Of course, yes, it's good to have that, but sometimes global policies, we need to figure out how to localize those policies, right? Like, for example, coming to China, global MNC being in China headquarters, with the Asia headquarters in China or something, how do they localize certain policies, right? It can't just be, okay, do exactly the same. That you can't really do exactly the same. So, but at least the first step is they're trying. So that's good.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, well, for local MNCs, right, the awareness is not there yet. And again, I put the word yet because once it catches on, it's going to be like, very quick implementation. So that's the difference I see right now. And we also understand why local MNCs are not right now in talking about D&I, because right now it's all about being able to be more stable financially, getting the bottom line better. It's all about finances first. I'm sure one day when the leaders sit down and talk about, okay, what we do next, how we can treat be better to our employees, that's when D&I is going to kick in.
Yeah.
So I'm really hopeful. Again, I'm hopeful about this. And in terms of the other companies that are thinking about D&I, right? Again, there's a spectrum. We have companies that are taking the first step. We have companies that are way ahead already. So everybody or every company has a different position right now in that whole D&I journey, which is good. And I tell you what, David, you said yes, people are thinking about the P word, the pandemic, affecting their business. It was actually during the pandemic last year that we see more companies willing to take the D&I journey.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, because we thought, oh my God, I was starting my Dni consulting business, and I thought there's nobody going to call us because nobody will have budget for us. But hey, it turned out for us, we were pleasantly surprised that companies actually took that time to start thinking about D&I policy, D&I overall, and then focusing also on LGBT inclusion.
Yeah. No, it's a fascinating topic because I know that, and I have more obviously experience with international companies, but I remember there was this sort of argument, you touched on it, that if you're an international company, you have to treat your employees the same around the world. But then there's also the local element that needs to be brought in. So on a company like when I used to work for, The Economist, it was quite simple. I mean, it was like, this is our values. We treat everyone the same. Everyone has the equal opportunity, blah, 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 all of that, wherever in the world. Same-sex marriage, it was, if you're part of this company, you buy into that belief. It was, the CEO would come around, do a tour around the world, and she would, tell people, this is who you're working for. So there was you couldn't sort of hide or pretend or whatever. But I know that it isn't that simple because, companies have to, and how they go about that. So I think it's a really, it's exciting actually, because I think that companies are going through a real transition, and it's really, for me, it's really good to hear that Chinese companies are picking up on that now, and the fact that they, even during the pandemic, have decided this is an important area, that is, wow. Yeah.
Well, it is important. I think someone must some calculation must have been done to show that retaining employees, taking care of employees is better than a high turnover, right? And why shouldn't, well, think about it, why shouldn't companies take care of their employees? Because employees, we spend most of our adult working life in a company. I said this at every webinar. We spend most of our working adult life in a company. We even spend more time at work than at home, if you make the calculation. Right? Why shouldn't we feel comfortable, be ourselves and why shouldn't companies take care of their employees that way?
Well, and also that they attract the better employees, that higher color, because people say, I want to be in a company that is like that. I mean, that's here in the West. I mean, that is definitely, there are stats to show that if you are good and you treat your employees well, etc., that you are actually going to attract the best employees. It's just it is.
And also David, right now the millennials are starting to get into the workforce, born after 2000, the year 2000, and they're the ones who have a lot of choices, right? And they will probably pick the companies that have better benefits, or at least more inclusive.
Yeah, they will.
Yeah. So I think it's a competition right now to be inclusive.
Yeah. Well, you've just started down this journey with your company, so I'm really excited to hear how that's going to go, because I think that I think that in society you can make a lot of changes, but as we found over here, that if you start to make those changes in the corporations, people, like you were saying, you feel more comfortable being out at work, you feel better, that it becomes much more of a norm. So I think that it's part of the journey that you're on, having been involved with Pride, and now I see working with corporations. So I'm excited to sort of see what you're going to be doing in the future.
I think I'm excited too. A little bit nervous, but yeah, excited. I don't know if you remember. I think in 2014 we still have not started working with companies yet. In fact, we were very grassroots back then. We thought that we should keep grassroots because we didn't want. What's that word? We didn't want any pink washing or rainbow washing in our alley. But I think times have changed. We do realize that companies are the ones who can make a bigger impact and help the community make a bigger impact.
No, I think that you had when we were talking about the run, one of the hotels hosted the party afterwards. I mean, I think that they sort of got involved and we had things from them, but I don't remember any sort of corporations being involved with Pride. I mean, you have to, there's the balance, because I think you get a lot of not a lot, but there are corporations who like to put their logo on something like a Pride event and then really aren't there, supporting it. It's like you're saying, it's pink washing, and I think you have to be very careful about that.
Well, yes, and there's a lot of debate about pink washing as well, right? But everything, we should see both sides of the story, right? One is, hey, sometimes a little pink washing helps because it really does create a buzz. And that buzz can get somewhere. Can get some people talking, can get more companies to be part of it and to really think about what to do next. Maybe you started with pink washing and then move into deep dive into different things, or move on to what you can deny.
Are there, when we talk about role models, are there many sort of role models in China who are out, like celebrities, as it were? Because that also is a way for people to be able to connect and say, oh, wow, I didn't know that so-and-so was LGBT, and is there?
Well, unfortunately, no. But then behind doors, of course, unofficially, I'm sure there are many. Well, there is a celebrity. Her name is Jingxing. If you remember, she former. She's transgender, and she's now living her life as a woman, and good for her. She's a celebrity. I think would be someone who's out, but then again, she doesn't want to be identified as like a community leader or anything like that, which is like, we understand as well. Besides her, well, to us, she's like, an icon, and she's done well for herself, and we're really proud of that. It's just that there isn't anybody like who's an actor who comes out and say, oh, I'm gay. I don't think there is someone like that yet.
No. No, I know. She was a presenter, wasn't she? An interviewer, am I right? Yeah,
she's a presenter, a TV personality, yes.
Yeah. Topic which obviously is very topical, the pandemic. How has that been for you in Shanghai? Because really, I know we've heard of lockdowns, but I wasn't sure how it hit you in Shanghai, and in particular, how has it sort of affected the LGBT community, or has it not?
Well, it was last year in March that February, March, that things got a little bit bad. I was actually spending Chinese New Year with my family in Malaysia in February, and I got back to Shanghai shortly before borders were closed. So I'm really glad that I came back because I know some friends who didn't make it back and then they couldn't come back now. We were worried for a few months, but I think the lockdown did us some good because, well, first of all, we just stayed home, and I think people were afraid, really afraid. So a complete lockdown was really good for us, and that helped to kind of mitigated the spread.
Yeah.
So we were able to quickly open up a little bit in April, and then May, June, it was like slowly businesses coming back together. We were all able to do events in June for Pride, and then subsequently in August we had this Ladies Who Tech big convention, and yeah, so that was good. This year we had a little bit of a scare in the beginning of the year. We thought, oh my goodness, again, but we managed to curb it. So things are pretty normal now, but I think that got people thinking like, okay, every time you go out, make sure you mask, you have your hand sanitizer, things like that. Come back, wash your hands, keep washing your hands. You know, things that get us to change our habits, way of life. In terms of affecting LGBTQ community, well, unfortunately, we always get the pandemic as an excuse for not being able to have our events.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to work our way around things like that. And
but you're not alone. I mean, we're not allowed to either. I mean, I don't know how much you're aware of how we've been locked down here, but you know, all of our I mean, the Danish one is going ahead, World Pride, but our Pride has been stopped. I mean, this is why we're doing our, you know, Northern Devon's Diversity Pride Festival online. And up until only a few weeks ago, we weren't, you know, we weren't allowed to sort of go into pubs and cafes to even sit down. And I think on Monday, nightclubs are being opened for the first time in over a year and a half. So a lot of the places where we would be able to meet and mix and have all been restricted. Yeah, we've been for about, it feels, well, certainly from November through till about March of this year. But there was another lockdown in winter. It was quite difficult, but we were. For instance, here I hardly saw anybody. I'm glad I had my dog. I mean, I think did it go on like that in China? And so, being LGBT, we were really quite. I think people were quite isolated. Yeah.
For a while, yes. Fortunately, there are some friendly venues around town, so we were able to hang out. Yeah. I think in terms of, let's say, if you want to compare staying home, okay, that's a different story, right? Depending. I think people who are LGBTQ community in the bigger cities maybe have it a little bit easier because most of us, we are in the big cities for work, so we don't live with our families, especially those who are not out to their families, and it's easier for them to still continue their the usual day-to-day routine. But I think for people who are in other cities, people who live with their families, I think that's a little bit more difficult because it's hard to be in a closet at home. I mean, I've been through that, and I would say that okay, it's not hard as in it's suffocating, but hard as it mean that you can't be yourself. You cannot. Sometimes you have to be careful what you say, who you talk to on the phone, and things like that. So maybe that affected some of the people in our community. And again, I think everyone, right? We have to find ways to deal with this. We have to find ways on how to move forward and how to move on. And everybody's talking about a new norm now. So this is a new norm. Working from home, working from anywhere.
Yeah. No, I think, you know, when it's interesting, you know, only 2 days ago I was talking to, like I said, with Frank in Uganda. He was talking about, you know, it's far more extreme there, but he was saying the same, you know, what the big challenge is have people moving back home and being in the closet 24 hours. And that is a real problem. And I just think, you know, I'm just thinking back to Pride in Shanghai Pride and that sense of family that you managed to create there. And it was a very strong family that we're going to need, you know, something like that going forward. We really will, because we just need to, I'm looking forward to be able to go back and some, like we're saying, being able to meet up, but being able to meet up with friends. Do you have any plans around that to be able to do something like that? Or,
you know, a lot of my closest friends are actually from the Pride family, and we do call our the team the family. Most of our volunteers, you know, every year we have many volunteers who sign up, and then they're all getting they all end up getting being close friends. Some get together.
Yeah.
So whether or not we have any big Pride events, right? I think people know now that there is a community out there, and community doesn't need to be thousands of people, right? Community can be a bunch of friends and being able to support each other and being able to be allies, whether you, and allies are important. I cannot stress that more. It's very important having allies to be part of the community. And we're going to continue building communities, having events to connect people, whether it's online or offline. We know that offline events tend to gather more people, but then, and in the beginning we thought that, okay, maybe online is not personable, but right now people are so used to being online. Sometimes we're so lazy to even go out. We just say, let's just catch up over Zoom and have a cup of coffee over Zoom, you know. And now we realize that being online, we can reach out more, because some people may not want to be seen or be out, but they want to maybe listen in and connect. So being online gives them the opportunity. So we're like, okay, that for me is the new norm. And I thought I wasn't going to like it, but I'm embracing this concept.
Yeah. No, look, it's a lot of, we have a lot of, there's a lot of things in common with how we're experiencing things here to what you're experiencing in China. But all I can say is, I mean, we are, you know, sadly, we're drawing to the end of our hour together. But
already?
No, I know, it's gone, it's gone fast. Well, it has for me.
7 years of conversation to catch up on.
I know. Lots and lots. It's been me that has been asking all the questions. We should do this again. You and me, just have you can ask me all the questions then. What I
online coffee.
Yeah, we'll have an online coffee. But look, I don't know if there's anything for me. It's just been, I hope people have managed to sort of have a feel of just how inspiring you are, Charlene, because you really, because these challenges you take on, I'm not trying to make, they haven't been simple at all. And when something gets, you know, some people say, oh, I can't do that. You never did that. I mean, as we did with the Pride Parade run, you found a way around it. And I think that is what is so inspiring, and also that you did it with a sense of fun. So what you're bringing to the business world, I think is, you know, I'm like, wow, I want to see where this goes, because I think this is Chinese companies need a bit of a shake-up, and I will, you know, companies around the world do, but I'm sure that with you giving them that nudge in China we're going to see things happen.
Well, I hope so. I hope we can make it. Yeah, step by step. I always say, we always say step by step.
Yeah.
We got to step the obvious first.
Yeah. I don't think, you know, we asked for some people a question. I've been trying to have a look to see if they were, but I think that as we put up in the notes, you know, our festival goes on. If you want to find out more about it, there's Sunrise Diversity, Facebook, and our website. As I said, this interview will be up and recorded later on, so people have a chance to follow that. But look, give my love to everyone who's still there in Shanghai and remembers me. And we'll have a chat, and we will definitely, I think it's November the 8th to the 16th is the Gay Games in Hong Kong. So that's November next year. I'll definitely be there. Yeah.
Yeah,
sure
we have some time to plan.
I ran the marathon at the games in Sydney. I don't think I'll be doing that this time. Good to see you.
All right, good to see you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.